Chatterjee, thank you so much for joining us on the CSR Journal interviews. At the outset, I'd like to know what was the thinking that went behind the mandate, the history, the philosophy, and what was the research done before the mandate came into existence?
Actually, the mandate is based on some central ideas.
Okay.
We know that CSR has been around in India for a long time in many ways and in many companies.
Okay.
We also know that CSR actually is originated from the US,
Yes.
part of it also in Europe. So the formalized systems of CSR we have seen mostly operating in the US. But the way it operates in the US is where companies work at their businesses primarily, and in the process of conducting their business, if the poor are helped out. So
It's
that's what
mainly
we
on
call shared value.
Shared value,
All right.
yes.
So in India, how do we adapt or adopt this? That's where the thinking really began.
Okay.
And it seemed to me that, first of all, reverse the order of that thinking and say, it's not about making profit out of what you do with the poor.
Okay.
First, make the profit and become a successful company. If you're not a successful company, you're not going to be successful at CSR.
True.
So reach a certain level of threshold of profits over several years, become a successful company. Having earned the profits, spend a part of it for the genuine benefit of the poor, the disadvantaged, the marginalized.
Okay.
With that 2%, then don't think about profits.
Correct.
With that 2%, give back and do good for society.
What about companies that were already doing philanthropy and giving a lot more than 2%? What did they say about this mandate?
Well, initially it took a while for us to convince them, because I also said that this is not about philanthropy.
Correct.
This is not about charity. This is not about donor-donee relationship. It's not about I'm stretching my hand out to help you because you're needy and I'm not. This is about being partners with the people that you're going to work with, people whose lives you're going to touch. So here again the equation is reversed.
Okay.
The idea is just be partners with those you want to help. So it's not a giveaway.
Okay.
It's not freebies that you are distributing.
Okay.
This is strategic CSR.
Correct. So when you say it's not a give and take, the Harvard Review report that came out in 2001, which spoke of the creating sharing value concept, they usually said that there was more of a transfer of values on the ground. In India, we have the concept of what we don't want, we give. It's just mostly a give and take relationship. How long do you think that will take to change? And what is the mindset that needs to go behind for that change?
Yeah, this actually is the right question to ask, because unless that mindset change happens, the real spirit of CSR will really not take hold.
Correct.
And part of the effort of the law or the mandate is to try and usher in that change. How do we do that? There are 2 or 3 factors which were important. First of all, be transparent in what you are doing.
Okay.
If you're spending 1%, half percent, whatever percent you're spending, tell the world what you did with that money. Put it up on your website. Share it with your shareholders, stakeholders, society, the media such as yourselves.
Thank you.
And then you get a grip on saying, let anybody look at what we are doing. This is good for society. Why should we conceal the good that we are doing?
Okay.
2, look at your CSR activity as projects so that you can evaluate them, you can monitor them, you can test the impact that the spending has actually achieved. And lastly, work closely with civil society organizations.
Okay.
This is the first law ever that's actually brought NGOs, trusts, not-for-profit companies into the very centrality of the way CSR is expected to work.
It should have worked on its own. We shouldn't have had a mandate for it.
Yes, I entirely agree, but had it?
It didn't.
Because it didn't, that's why there was space for the law to come.
Okay.
Like anything else, if there is no need, no want, no space, there will be nothing to fill it up with.
True.
I saw this in 2009 when I first brought in the guidelines for public sector enterprises.
Correct.
And I saw all of these public sector enterprises who were created for doing good for society.
Absolutely.
Profit was not their only motive. So how were they doing their CSR?
Okay.
And it's after studying that I came out with these guidelines.
Okay. What do you think is the success rate for PSUs? Is it going the way you thought out it should be, or do you think they still need some space to do better?
They need a lot of space to do better. They actually had the advantage of starting earlier.
True.
Remember, the guidelines were
was in
issued on the 1st of
2010.
April 2010, and the Act came into force from the 1st of April 2014.
Okay.
So it has literally 4 years
To
that the
make that
PSEs had the advantage of starting. And I'm afraid they really haven't done justice to that 4-year lead.
Okay.
So they still need to get their act together.
What is the role of the IICA in driving Section
135.
135
Yeah.
and all the thinking that went behind the Companies Act?
Well, IICA played a very big role, primarily because the National Foundation for CSR is located in the IICA.
Okay.
And because it was located there, all the support systems that were also required for CSR to take off. If you're trying to hire a finance person for your company, who would you hire?
But
Somebody from a business school who
Correct.
has a degree or something in
Absolutely.
financial management. If you were looking for a CSR person, who would you hire?
someone who has a certified course or to take me in that.
Where are they?
That's what
Where's
you
the
came up
certificate
with.
course?
Yeah.
Who is the professional? So one important thing for us, and that's how we came up with the certificate course, and that's where IICA began.
Okay.
I talked to you about the synergy with civil society organizations. How many of them are there in India? 3.3 million. There are 33 lakh NGOs in this country.
Okay.
And
They're growing
they
by
need
the
to
day.
get their act together.
Yeah.
So if you are a corporate chief and you want to do your CSR, which NGO would you select? You don't
Okay.
want to scroll through 33 lakh names.
Yeah.
You're going to have to find where is the due diligence done? Where can I find a good NGO? So IICA set up this implementation agency hub
Okay.
where we do the due diligence for corporates.
Okay.
Now you click IICA website,
Yeah.
you say
That's
education, Maharashtra, and we give you a list of
list of
NGOs to
NGOs.
whom you can reach out.
Okay. A lot of funds came in after the mandate. How much do you think sufficiently reached the drought affected areas in Maharashtra?
Oh, not a significant amount at all. Not a significant
Why do you
amount
think
at
that
all.
happened?
And that is perhaps because there was lack of coordination, maybe,
Okay.
between government actually coordinating the efforts of these NGOs. You see, NGOs have also to be given some sort of space, some sort of mandate, some sort of coordination. They just can't go in blindly.
Okay.
And also corporates themselves who are funding those NGOs, they kept asking, what is it that we can do? Now, government, let's be clear, is doing a lot for the drought affected areas.
Okay.
We tend to denigrate government's efforts, we tend to criticize them, and in a democratic society we should, to keep them on their toes. But to say they're doing nothing would be incorrect.
All right.
There's a lot of strategy, a lot of energy being pumped into it. But these efforts of government alone are not enough.
True.
The agrarian crisis is so deep rooted and for such a long time that any help coming from corporate and NGO India together would be of great value.
Okay.
And I think now government itself is beginning to realize this. They're trying to get a strategy in place, and hopefully in the coming years we will see far more involvement in the Vidarbha region and for the farmer suicide than we've ever seen before.
Do you think we need a monitoring body in place? Because recently there was a notice sent to about 100 companies saying that they haven't spent enough and they haven't showcased them correctly in their reports also. So that was mainly for the corporates. Do you think we eventually need another bigger body to include all the stakeholders, the individuals, the NGOs, probably the media like you said? Do you think we need a monitoring body in place for the same?
I would hesitate to use the word monitoring body, because anything that's regulatory in nature is a problem. What we were trying to do in the IICA, with the cooperation of the Ministry of Corporate Affairs, is to try and build a national dashboard.
Okay.
Like you're a portal. So the IICA is trying to build a portal, which will be the first of its kind ever in the world, which will allow you, say, you're interested to know, what did Asian Paints do last year? What was their budget? Where did they spend this money? Where? With what NGOs? How much? How many projects? Where are these happening?
Okay.
And then that dashboard would reflect every rupee of the spending that they undertook.
Okay.
And anyone, any member of the public can access it. That is true transparency, and this is going to take a while. If I were to ask this in the US or Europe, if I were to ask the President of the United States, how much money did the United States spend on CSR last year? What would he say? Is that even a question? Because we can never answer it. We don't know and we'll never know.
It's part of their value system.
But in India, we have a way to track, to quantify, identify.
Okay.
And we'll be the first nation on earth to be able to do that.
Okay. So when you say every rupee spent, what about corporates who give money to NGOs in terms of white and take it back in black? There are some who do that. And what about the monitoring for that? How are you going to go strictly to the last bit for them?
You see, I don't know whether government should get too closely into that. That is partly the way that audits function.
Correct.
I'll tell you how we set the mechanism in. We don't want something like the IRS or something as a special body monitoring this, looking over people's shoulders. It's not a witch hunt.
Okay.
But what we did was this: elevate CSR in each company to the board level. Let's presume for a minute you are a member of the CSR committee.
Okay.
You're the independent director. And you know that your budget for this year is 100 crores. You're spending it. What do you know, first of all? That you're personally responsible under the law.
Absolutely.
So what will you do?
I will make sure that every rupee is accounted for.
And you will see that your auditors, your auditing mechanism, your monitoring mechanism captures the last pie, because you're personally responsible.
Absolutely.
Now, when you elevate CSR to the board level and make members of the board themselves personally responsible, the responsibility to see or track the money goes up to that level.
Okay.
So that's what I say, CSR from backroom to boardroom.
Okay. At a recent conference at IICA, you showed the kind of figures that were going around in terms of the needs all over the country, and I think Rajasthan had a poor figure over there, and there was more to be reached out to the northeast side also.
Quite right.
Can you throw more light upon that, please?
Yes. In that first national review that IICA did, this was for a little over 400 companies whose data was available to us then. We were trying to track where is the money going, at least state-wise. Now, if you talk about the poorest of the poor in India, in which states do they live? Jharkhand, Bihar, Orissa, Northeast.
Yeah.
Where did the CSR spending go?
Mainly in
Tamil Nadu,
Maharashtra.
Karnataka, Gujarat, Maharashtra, and to some extent in Rajasthan.
Okay.
What does it show? It shows that most of corporate India are in the developed states.
Absolutely.
Their offices, their
Headquartered
production factories
offices,
are all
yeah.
here. And they tended to spend the CSR closer to where they can monitor, they can look at, and where they are situated.
Okay.
Because the poorer states are less served by industry and these companies, the money going there was far less. So the question that review posed to government was this: maybe it's too early, but can we tweak the law in some way to incentivize, maybe not direct, the flow of CSR funds to where it's most needed? It was just a question, because after all, the IICA is part of the process that helps policy making. And if we see this trend persisting over the next 3 or 4 years, then we could ask government that, it's time that we maybe tweak the law a bit to help money flow in the right direction. In this process, there is a corporatization of NGOs.
Okay.
Because NGOs, when they work with corporates, realize that corporates want financial discipline, reports and returns. They want to track where their money is going. NGOs don't have those systems built in
True.
to
It's
those
an
sophisticated
acquired
mechanisms. So they understand, hey, the corporate wants this, so let's get our act together. The corporate mind is also changed by the NGOs because the NGOs bring needs to the corporate table.
Okay.
And the corporates say, hey, you're right, I didn't even think about this. But you're echoing this need, and now I know that these people need this. So how can we help?
Okay.
So this conversation helps to bridge that gap between the trust deficit
Okay.
between the NGO world and the corporate world.
Okay. How do you think the CSR funds can help, kind of catalytically help the SDGs for 2030? Because India is half a century behind, according to a UNESCO report. And we are still funding a lot in main categories such as education and health, but we're still lagging behind. What do you have to say about that?
The rationale of the CSR legislation is exactly what you said. Why is there a CSR legislation? Because SDGs are basically development goals. Okay. Who does development in a country?
Government.
Government.
The government.
Everyone says we pay taxes. Government develops.
Correct.
Because the development agenda lies in government. Is government enough?
No, it's not. It's just one of the stakeholders.
Who should be the others?
All of us, the corporates and the citizens.
Absolutely. So what does CSR do? It says this corporate and this civil society organizations, they supplement and complement the efforts of government in development.
But we're half a century behind, practically.
So if government were to do it alone,
It can't happen.
would we ever bridge this 50-year gap?
Yeah.
Maybe a little bit. Maybe over time. Let's give them benefit of doubt.
Doubt.
And we have, after all, not done so badly. But this process would be accelerated
Okay.
if the corporates and NGOs were to supplement and complement government efforts.
Okay.
The purpose of this legislation, the way I saw it,
Okay.
was to integrate the corporate effort with the national development agenda.
Okay.
That's why we are so far better in CSR than any other nation on earth.
Okay. How is it that we can make corporate social responsibility the citizens' social responsibility also? Because it shouldn't come across as a jargon, say CSR and big words and I don't know what it is. Because every individual is doing some kind of social responsibility. So how is it that we can practically dumb it down to them and tell them they are also an integral part of it?
Yeah, it's hard, of course, to treat the single individual as a participant in this process.
Okay.
But what happens is every employee in organization, let's say the workforce of India, and that's growing at an enormous rate because of our demographic dividend.
Correct.
So younger people coming in, working in the corporate world, working in organizations. If the organization itself is a giving back organization, or prides itself on the CSR work they do, then the culture of the CSR seeps right down to the last employee.
Okay.
So this is one good way of bringing in the public at large into doing what they do.
Okay. It's important for all the activities to a certain extent to be aligned with the core business values, and their allied businesses also of any company. How do you see that progressing in the country, and how do you think it will be over the next few years?
This question very often comes up about core business.
Correct.
Okay. Let me ask you, if you were a manufacturer of LED bulbs, what is your core business? Manufacture bulbs well, sell them at a competitive rate, make profits.
And the waste material that goes into it, the whole biodegradable aspect of it has to be taken into consideration.
Right. So then that should not be an afterthought.
Simultaneously.
And obviously it is. Because you think, hey, my job is to make bulbs, sell them at the highest profit, satisfy my shareholders, we're all happy.
Correct.
But the damage you're doing to the environment, the consequences of what you're doing, what you are taking away or out of society, what are you going to do to minimize the damage in the first place, and then give back to society the stuff that you're taking out.
Okay.
That's the reality of the CSR thought.
I recently spoke to one corporate, which I of course wouldn't name. They were working in sync with the government, and their main aim was to build toilets and provide sanitation to the people over there. The government over there said, you give us the money and we will take care of it. In return, they didn't get any completion certificates, and neither of the toilets were built. So what do you have to say about this kind of corruption, even in social good?
This is absolutely reprehensible. The first and only thought about the legislation is CSR money should never, ever, even by mistake, be given into government coffers.
Okay.
The law specifically states that there are 3 agencies only to whom a corporate entity can give its money. An NGO, a trust, and a Section 8 not-for-profit company.
Okay.
Government is doing what it has to do in any case. Corporates are not expected to fund government.
But they create a block and they don't let them go ahead. So that's also like an
That's their
obstacle in the
problem.
process.
Let it be. But you cannot give money to them. Once you stop, the blocks will disappear because they'll say, despite the blocks, we're not getting anything.
Okay.
There are only 2 or 3 places in the law, such as the Prime Minister's Relief Fund, or the Swachh Bharat Kosh, or the Ganga Development Fund, and there legitimately you can give, and you're welcome to give. Corporates typically hesitate to do this
Okay.
because they realize that if that happens, it's good for the nation, it's good for the country, it's good for government. But what is in it for the corporate?
Okay.
They don't get to monitor the money. They don't get to see where it is actually going to be spent. How is it going to be spent? If it's your money, you would want to see the beneficiary.
Absolutely.
You would want to make that money work for you because it's your money. So whereas you can give, and certainly there are avenues of giving, but most corporates do feel that they would like to control what they're giving and try to actually see the end result of what they've done.
Correct. Correct. So one of the main objectives in creating the mandate, as you said, was to create an enabling environment for the corporate to come on field and, use strategy to make it happen. What happens when they just give money to the relief fund of the PM and they've left it? They're done. So do you think that's working in the direction of what you decided?
You would be surprised. Hardly any corporates gave any money to the PMRY.
We hear them all the time in the news saying that.
But you will find that the quantum given is very little.
Okay.
What was the intention of writing that? Suppose you as the CEO found on the 28th or 29th of March that instead of 2% you'd spend 1.8.
Okay.
You have 2 days left. What would you do? This was the safety valve.
Okay.
Idea was that rather than not comply, you could at least put the balance there and say, I'm compliant.
What about carrying it forward to the next year?
We thought about that. In the guidelines that I had written for public sector enterprises, that carry forward provision was there. But it isn't there in the law because I think there was too much opposition to that. And we said, let's just do it for 3 years and see if they can spend even that 2% each year. And if they don't say so, what does the law say after all? There's no punishment for not doing.
Absolutely.
Just declare to the wide world that, sorry, I didn't spend the 2%, and say why.
Okay. So when they are sent notices, what's the next step after that?
No. So now when they are sent notices, then they have to say, why is it that they defaulted?
Okay.
What was the reason for not doing? Remember that the CSR law prescribes a report, which you would see there. The filing of that report is mandatory.
Correct.
If you don't file the report, you violate the law, and therefore you are subject to the punishments that the law itself evokes. So now the idea of these notices was perhaps not so much immediate punishment, but to raise consciousness and awareness levels. Come on, 1 year has gone by. We're now into the second year. So even if the first year you didn't really, step up to the plate, now you have the opportunity to do so. So it's more like a warning bell.
All right. What do you have to say about giving money to politicians and political parties, because they are mainly on the field, their reach is more, they have a better understanding of what's happening over there. So this CSR funds can be directed over there, or should it not be? What do you have to say about that?
They're specifically banned under the law.
Correct.
And we did that for a specific purpose, because the idea is not to gain political brownie points. The system gives MPs, MLAs, others already enough. Now it was 5 crores to begin with, the MP Lad Development Fund. The MLAs are getting money. Now it's gone to 10 crores. We're expecting it to go up to 20 crores. So they already have monies
For social
coming to
good.
them for social good in any case.
Okay.
So why should they encroach on CSR territory? And once things get politicalized, particularly in our nation, which is so vulnerable to politicization, then the money begins to wear a political color, which is not
Correct.
what we want to do.
Correct.
We want real development to happen.
Okay. Section 135 has attracted a lot of good talent. What is your opinion about this, where a lot of social entrepreneurs have come into the picture?
You know, if you ask me my personal opinion, I think that profit in the area of CSR is not a bad word.
All right.
That's why we put the Section 8 companies there. If what you do in CSR, and even if it is a profitable enterprise, if it is plowed back into the CSR venture, rather than just a means of profit, then you just become another company. But if you are a CSR venture and the money that you get or profits that you make from whatever venture you're doing, you plow back into the venture,
Okay.
then for me it's not a bad thing.
All right.
Currently, we don't recognize social entrepreneurship. Frankly speaking, when I was trying to, make the initial drafts, we had included social entrepreneurship.
Okay.
But the perception was making profit out of doing good
Well, not so
doesn't
good.
look good for India, at least at this time.
All right.
If you're doing good, just do it. But I think it's an idea whose time will come,
Okay.
and we will have a good base of social entrepreneurs also coming into the market.
Okay. On a very personal note, when I say individual social responsibility, could you tell me some that you do?
No, my last 7 years of my life have been so consumed not by doing anything personally for anyone, but trying to put in place systems, monitoring processes, facilitating the enabling environment that I spoke about. But now that I'm out of government, now I can do something on my own.
Okay.
So that will happen in due course.
Okay. Could you tell me very briefly what is CSR to you?
Good question. And this is the part that's not in the law itself.
Okay.
But it's about helping, at the end of the day, the poor, the marginalized, the disadvantaged.
Okay.
Any CSR activity must begin and end with them in mind. If that is not done, then we're not into CSR at all.
The beneficiary at the last mile is most
Must be.
important.
Absolutely.
Okay. It's been a pleasure to speak with you, Mr. Chatterjee. Thank you so much for joining us on the CSR Journal.
Wonderful, Neha. Delighted.
Thank you.